Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. Let me tell you about today's episode. I have got the first Mystery Box Monday of 2023 here for you, and we'll chat a little bit more about that in just a minute. And I will cover the giveaway info at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that. But for now, let's take a quick peek at the project I'll be making today. We'll be talking about a tissue paper background technique. We'll be using some watercolor techniques, and we're going to dive into some India ink markers. So let's get started. Mystery Box Monday was a project I did back in 2020, and I am reviving it for 2023 because I just enjoy it, and I hope you will get something interesting, entertaining, and useful out of it. The idea here is that this is a grab bag, discounted mystery box of supplies, and this one is from Peacecraft Love. I'll link you up below. And I have no idea what's in this box, but at any rate, I'm going to reach into this box and grab 3 supplies and come up with a project that will link all these 3 supplies together. So let's see what I've got this time. I have a package of die cuts from Echo Park, some India ink markers from Faber-Castell, and a stamp set. So what can I make with all of these? As I was looking over these supplies, the little tag topper on the stamp package caught my attention, as well as some tags in the die cut pack. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a tag with this. And the stamp set is kind of Halloween themed. She has like a skull and crossbones on her hat. I guess it's pirate themed more than Halloween. So I'm going to eliminate that skull and crossbones and incorporate some of the wintry items from the die cut pack in there. I pulled out a die set for the tag structure, and that is a scrapbook.com set, so I will link you up to that. And these tags, I'm going to fussy cut pieces and parts out of them to come up with elements that are going to work for my tag. So there was a little saying on this tag, I can't quite remember what it was, but something about hot chocolate. So with that saying, it seemed like a fun saying. I did go through and find a hot chocolate mug icon. So those pieces fit naturally together. And with her hat, I'm going to put a snowflake on it with a leftover bit from one of the cut aparts or one of the fussy cutting elements that I did. I'm going to use a circle punch to punch out that snowflake. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that leftover bit wasn't the right size for my punches, so I did have to grab a brand new bit, but I punched off the topmost element, and then I can save the rest of the tag for another project. So I pulled out Vicki Boutin Foundation's mixed media paper, since I do have that India ink here, which I've worked with just a little bit in the past, and you'll see me kind of explain more of that as we go. I am going to make the basis of this tag with a tissue paper technique. I don't know if you've ever tried this before, but it can be really fun and add some nice texture to your project. So I found from my tissue paper stash, this happens to have some gold embossing on it, so that is a pretty little bonus to this. I'm going to crumple it up to give it texture, and I'm just kind of moving it around and trying to crumple up any areas that were, too flat. I am going to bring out my adhesive and a small brayer and some cleanup materials because this is a little bit messy. I'm going to squeeze a generous amount of glue, liquid glue, onto this base cardstock and brayer it smooth. And then I'm just going to gently tap that tissue paper onto my project. And right away, I'm going to clean up my brayer with a spritz of water and a towel so that the glue doesn't damage the brayer. Now that does need to dry nicely before you run it through a die machine. And here I am changing up the size of my tag, just so I can fit all those elements on it better. And this tag set happens to have a little tag hole punches there, so you can tuck those into place and get a complete tag there. So I'm going to run that through my die cut machine, and that's when I realized, don't run things through the die cut machine that already have texture because it smushes them and it flattens out the texture. But that created an opportunity. I'm going to add a second layer of tissue paper to this. And because tissue paper is slightly translucent and because this tissue paper has gold embossing on it, I'm going to get multiple layers of that embossing showing through on this project. So that ended up being pretty fun. I'm going to repeat the whole process. I've got my liquid glue, I've got my brayer, I've got my cleanup materials, and of course I've got my tissue paper, and I forgot to spread out my glue so that it wouldn't be obvious lines of glue. Like I said, that tissue paper is transparent and you can see stripes of glue if you don't spread it out. Okay, with that done and repaired and cleaned up, I am going to just trim off the excess edges around this tag. And there I kind of pointed out how you could see multiple layers of that embossing. And it's best to let it dry all the way so it doesn't tear on you, because the tissue paper gets flimsy when it's wet. And here I was punching it when it was wet, and tissue paper doesn't punch well with punches anyway. So I was getting a little impatient with myself, and I just fixed it by using the end of a pin to kind of push the frayed edges of the tissue paper to the back of the tag. And I'll just smear a little glue back there to kind of hold them down. And I got that fixed. And it is time to move on to the stamping portion. So I've got my stamp here, and I am not sure which inks work best with India ink. India ink is a type of permanent ink, and it may be oil-based. I am not entirely sure, but if I figure out that information, I'll put it in the description down below. So I am testing out this ink in various ways. First wet, then I dry it, and then I pull out some other inks from my stash to see if maybe those might be a better fit with the India ink markers. And I do decide to go with the Gina K amalgam ink and heat set it really well. Maybe just letting it set overnight to dry could do it, but like I said, I was impatient and I wanted to get through my project. So I am using a little bit of masking tape here to cover up the skull on her hat. Now, I probably could have gotten away with not doing this because I am just going to cover up her hat with a embellishment. But I wanted to do this in case you've never done this with stamping. You can mask off portions of the stamp that you don't want showing up and then peel away the masking, and then you're good to go. So down it goes onto my cardstock there. And because I'm going to fussy cut it out, I'm not worried about it being the same cardstock that I was testing out the inks and stuff on. So here is a little look at that lovely girl. And here is where I'm playing with that India ink to see how it blends. I have played with this kind of ink just a tiny bit, but it actually blends, at least on this cardstock. Your cardstock may totally vary because the Vicky Bouton has a little bit of a coating to it. It did blend way better than I expected. In fact, almost too much. So I had to really go gently with the darker colors when trying to blend. But with a little bit of practice, I was getting a kind of technique that I felt was pretty good, and then I was ready to move on to other parts of the project. So I am going to use the markers to color in parts of her dress, her hat, and actually I think that's it. And then I'm going to watercolor the rest of her hair, the stripes on her dress. I know it might be a little bit hard to see, at least it is for me, but her dress is a stripy dress. So I did pull out my watercolor set and I mixed up a kind of gray color. This pan doesn't have a black in it. It looks like it does, but that really is a Payne's gray, which is deceptive because it is a blue color. So mixing up my own gray color, I'm going to start with one coat on her hair, and I'm going to need to add up layers of watercolor to get that color deeper and darker as we go, making sure it dries in between each layer. So as I'm doing her hair, I am leaving portions of her hair unpainted down the center of her kind of curl waves there, to kind of give the idea of light shining off her hair. And I'm doing that same idea with the stripes on her dress. So I'm putting the darker color towards the outside of the stripe and fading it in towards the inside. And with an additional step of only painting the outside and then drying off my brush and dragging that paint towards the middle. Now, I did have a little too much paint, so I could soak that up with my dry brush, wipe it off on my towel, and then drag the color in. So if you have too much color, it's just going to be a solid stripe across. So that helps even out my paint so that I do get that gradient ombre effect, which makes it look like light is shining on the project. So I just kind of kept all my lighting, all my highlighted areas that are light in color, in tone, in the center of the objects. I did a little bit of painting down on her shoes, just keeping it lighter where any of the shoe parts overlapped and darker on the bottom part of the overlap. Hopefully that makes sense. And I got her shoes colored in, and I will go here in a minute and I will add a little bit of yellow, which I believe I mixed. Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I will add a little bit of a golden yellow color onto her tights because they are printed tights and they have like little stars on them. So that gets a little nitpicky, but I am getting into those little details. And I'm doing a 2nd coat of her hair at this point because while I was painting other things, her hair was drying. So you can see how adding this 2nd layer of color on top is deepening up her hair. So it's a little tricky not to paint over the areas that I left open in the last layer. So just be a little careful with that if you're going to try these kind of techniques there. And then I watered down the color for her hair, and I'm going to use that as the same color for her skin. If I got too much color in the center of her face, I would dry off my brush, soak up the color, and then go back and do it again. So here we go. I made a browner color and I got too much in the center of her face. So I'm drying off my brush, soaking it up, and that's going to leave a halo of color around her face. And then I will go add in even more color to the shadow areas where her hair is overlapping her face. So little bit of details like that can help your coloring go a long way. I'm finishing off her tights with a very, very light tint of blue just to make it differentiated from the white cardstock background. That's all I'm really doing. So I did do a 3rd layer on her hair, and then my camera cut out. And you missed me coloring with the markers. But the process with the markers was the same thing, both as the practice piece that I did and as the watercoloring. Darker colors to the outside and faded in towards the middle. Hopefully you didn't miss too much with that. So it is assembly time now. The snowflake piece goes on her hat, and I am shading that in a little bit more with the marker to keep it from being stark white against that green hat. I am adding foam dots to just about all of these pieces to give more layers and dimension, including my girl and my title piece. And then I'm going to add just a foam dot to the steam on the hot cocoa mug. And I think that adds a nice balance of dimension. And a final touch here is to add a little bit of that India ink using my finger to the ridges of the tissue paper. And you'll see me do that again in just a moment. I am also going to edge my little title piece so that it pops a little bit more. And then I can just go ahead and stick everything down. I did put a little liquid glue behind the mug and then popped up that steam with that foam dot that I added earlier. And that was the view of me adding more ink to the background. And that is almost going to complete our tag. For me, a tag isn't complete without some kind of ribbon or twine. So I just went to my stash and found some colors that would coordinate. I'm going to use a wider green and go ahead and staple that into place with my tiny attacher. And I'm going to use 2 layers of this red baker's twine. And at first I thought I was just going to stick it through and tie it to the back, but I didn't really quite like how that was working out. So despite my twine being a little short, I did manage to get a tiny bow on it in the front for that extra layer of interest to that tag. And that completes our project for this time. But before you go, I want to let you know that I have a giveaway for this time around. Now, I will do giveaways from time to time along with this series throughout the year. This time around, I am giving away both that tag and that girl stamp because they're not quite my style and I don't think I would use them much in the future, so I will share them off with you. I have this Mystery Box Monday series just because it's fun, and if it makes it fun for you by having small giveaways, that's a win-win for both of us. So all you have to do to enter this giveaway is leave a comment below specifically saying that you're interested in the giveaway, and I will draw a name and get in touch with the winner. All the nitpicky details about this giveaway will be in the description. You'll have about a week to enter, and then I'll give away the prize after that. So thank you so much for joining me this time around. I hope you'll stick with me for the future Mystery Box Mondays. They'll come at you maybe once or twice a month moving forward. So until next time, I hope you have an artful day.